Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third day of RSA Conference 2024. Do you guys have a good lunch? Maybe, maybe not. Still awake? Need caffeine? Yeah. Okay. Welcome to the afternoon of the session here is Quantum Safe Computing for Telecommunications. And we have our speakers here and a moderator here. I want to make sure we have the grounds covered. Due to the fire marshal rules, everybody has to stay seated. If you want to get up, and please exit the room when you come in. And another one is no live streaming recording is allowed, but you can take pictures. You're welcome to take pictures. Without further ado, I will introduce our moderator, Emma Smith. Here you go.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and welcome to this session on quantum safe computing for telecoms. Really glad you're all here. I'm going to start with a short intro, and then I'll introduce our panelists, and we'll have some active conversation in front of you, and then there'll be 10 minutes of time at the end for questions. So I think to ask questions, you just need to move towards the mic when we get to that point. So thanks for joining us. I'm Emma Smith, Cybersecurity Director at Vodafone. I've been at Vodafone for 9 years. Today we want to talk about quantum safe computing. You've probably read about it. You might have some strong opinions about quantum safe computing and the timeline in which we need to deal with it and the size of the problem. Today, what we want to do is navigate between some of those extreme perspectives and bring some pragmatism to the topic and look at how do we think we might want to go about solving the problem. Maybe a bit of a recap first of all about what's been happening in the last 6 months. And we've seen the European Union publish recommendations. In particular, they've advised member states to consider migrating their current digital infrastructures and services for public administrations and critical infrastructure to post-quantum cryptography as soon as possible, was the advice they gave. We saw the US sign into law in December 2023, the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act. We've seen PQC being adopted into Apple iMessage. We've seen AWS taking steps. We've seen the industry support across telecoms and financial services, with different working groups being set up in sectors that are most affected by and use cryptography. And at some point, hopefully this year, we will see NIST publish the PQC standard algorithms. So let's watch this space. So is it too early? Are we misguided? Are we spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt? Or is this a topic that we need to handle? Our panelists will address that for us today. You can make up your own mind after the session and hopefully ask us some questions about it. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about why we think it's relevant today. We'll talk about our views about what to do about changing cryptography and across different types of organizations. We'll bring a telecoms lens to that in particular and how we've started the journey. And then we'll talk about some of the steps we're taking. Let me introduce our panelists first of all. So Ray sat in the middle. Ray Harishankar is IBM Fellow. He's within the quantum team and focuses on quantum safe. So Ray, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here, Emma. And again, folks, thank you and good afternoon to everyone.
And they're Blair Canavan, Director of Business Development, Digital Identity and Security at Thales, the British pronunciation of Thales.
That's right. Yeah, if you don't understand how to pronounce Thales, don't feel badly. Most people call it Thales. It took me a while, but it's Thales, so I just want to set the record straight. But we don't mind what you call us, just call us.
And then last but by no means least, Paul Hopkins, who's Head of Security Strategy, Architecture and Security by Design at Vodafone. So Paul, welcome.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
Okay, shall we start with a short video, Ray, first of all? I'm going
Sure.
to move us on. I've got to show a quick disclaimer on the slides. There's our panelists, and I'm going to attempt to play a video. Wish me luck. Here we go.
So the video doesn't have voice, so I'm going to be the voiceover, and I'm going to talk as little as I possibly can. This actually provides an insight into the work that has been done collaboratively between Vodafone and IBM over the past 18 months as part of the Post-Quantum Telco Network Task Force, and some feed into that. This showcases a heat map-based approach for prioritization of activities. And you'll see that coming up soon. And the use case is we take a deep dive into, here's the heat map that I just referred to, how you can figure out what you need to prioritize on. And once you have figured out what your prioritization looks like and where you need to focus on, we took a deep dive into automated discovery of cryptography for, and in this case, we double-click into a key use case for eNode B to secure gateway connection, also using a component from the partner Nokia. And the whole idea is, how do we scale this in an automated manner and minimizing disruption to the ongoing operations to the extent we ought to be doing that, right? And all of this is underpinned by the collaboration between Vodafone, IBM, and the information input from the Post-Quantum Telco Network Task Force. We'll talk about that a little later.
Super, thank you. Right, Blair, I'm going to start by asking you a question first of all.
Shoot.
What problem is Quantum Safe solving and why now?
Let's start with the why now. Procrastination is not a plan. And a lot of us here in this panel, and we belong to a really large ecosystem of partners, we collaborate on a regular basis about the timing. And one of the things that we're all very comfortable assuring this audience and any audience is that the time is now to start preparation, because if you make an assumption or presumption that you're going to overhaul your crypto within your organization within, say, 1 year, I think my mic is still going, you are grossly underestimating the amount of time it takes to make this kind of a change. And this kind of a change only happens once, likely in a generation. For those that have been around crypto like ourselves for quite a while, this is the first time that I've seen something like this in 25 plus years. So we believe very strongly that the preparation and the planning is something that any organization can undertake now. And this idea of predicting of when a quantum event is going to happen, let me remind the room, and this is not about the sky is falling or yelling at a windmill. This is fundamental research is showing us that a few near misses over the last couple of years have given us an opportunity to use this as fire drills. How prepared are you to change out the fundamental underpinning of your entire security infrastructure, which is based on RSA and ECC, that we all took for granted and we never worried about? So the bottom line to all this is you have to know where it is, you got to identify it, and you have to understand that you have a long road ahead of you within your organization and those that you're supporting to overhaul basically the rivets on a ship. And so that's my kind of analogy, that this is bigger than you think it is, and you'll be surprised how much planning you're going to have to partake in. So I hope that gives an indication of how strongly I feel about that.
Thanks.
Just to add a bit of color commentary, it's changing the rivets on a ship while you're sailing.
Very true.
With all the passengers on board.
With the passengers on board.
Ray, maybe next question to you. Why is crypto agility important?
So let me first start by defining crypto agility, because people have their own definitions of what crypto agility is. And it's the ability for any enterprise to switch from using one crypto algorithm to another with minimal or no impact, right? No impact is the desired target. And you may say, why is this important? Because the ship is sailing, and we are changing the rivets as the ship is sailing. And so you may find that one of the rivets that you had may have to be redone. In other words, the algorithm that you're using may have a need to be replaced for a variety of reasons, whether it is improved, or you may find a more optimal one that you want to use, or it is compromised. Any of these cases may happen. And so you have a need to replace the algorithm that you are using. How do you do that while the ship is sailing? That's where crypto agility comes in. So essentially, it gives you 4 areas that I would call out are areas of focus. One, it essentially gives you the basic security that you need for your enterprise. The second is, I may call resilience and the responsiveness. So if there is a change that does happen for regulatory reasons or for the reasons I just outlined, and you have to make the change, how can you be responsive? That's pretty important. And the other is compliance. There are always going to be compliance needs that come up that may demand you to do something, and how quickly do you become compliant? And the last thing is interoperability, right? All of these are some of the critical reasons, I would say, why crypto agility is important for an enterprise to adopt. And given the transformation that you're making is so vast, it's a good time to introduce that.
So we've talked about a big problem statement there. Paul, where should enterprises start their journey?
I think it might be best answering that by talking about where we've started our journey, really, and some of the false starts that we had along the way here. I think we've got ourselves now into a good position, really. So I think and I think one of the most useful things that we've done, and the most useful things we've done with the community, and we mentioned it on the video, was the post-quantum telecommunications network task force, that we set up under GSMA, and the collaboration that we've got going with the suppliers. One of the key documents, and I think one of the most important things for our industry, was really identifying the use cases, and I think that's where I wish we'd started 18, 12 months ago, Right. We have a unique set of infrastructure. Hopefully some of that within the room are aware of that, And it was really about identifying those uses where we've got that cryptography use, where those sensitive flows are, and then starting to map them out and understanding who's involved in fixing them. Sometimes it's suppliers and the operators together. Sometimes it's other operators as well as the suppliers, because we've got interoperability issues that we need to resolve, And all of these take a little bit of time, and I think that's sort of set the scene. And if there's one thing I'd say to enterprises at large, whichever sector you're in, is start with those key use cases. I think maybe if I just one more minute. The other couple of things that have been quite valuable that we've now started, really, well, one we completed and one we're just at the start now, is a little bit of experimentation if you think your sector or your use cases require it. So for us, we did some experimentation with some of the quantum algorithms with a partner to understand the effect for the customer, and whether swapping out algorithms, whether changing them, does it have any jitter or a delay here? And that also gave us a bit of a valuable insight, to things we might need to do along our communications path for our customers. And then the third thing I think we might come to a little bit later, but was about understanding how you're going to do large-scale discovery, and I think manual processes aren't really going to cut it. And again, we had a little bit of a false start there, thinking we could do them one by one, but I think we've now got ourselves to a better place where we can scale out, and I think those are the 3 things I'd focus on.
Thanks, Paul. I mentioned at the beginning, Blair, about the NIST process. What's the latest on standardization?
Well, the good news is there's an imminent release of the most recent algorithms. Let's call them what they're going to be, standards for post-quantum. So the most recent probably rumblings are sometime in July of this year, we are going to see the release of Dilithium, Sphinx, Kyber, and Falcon in their new names, which I haven't really memorized yet. But why does that matter? Well, it shifts things dramatically from theoretical to practical. In other words, it doesn't mean that tomorrow or the day after you flip switches and all those algorithms just magically jump into the application stacks and the vendor community. But in parallel, organizations like ourselves, all sitting up here, work together, and we're all testing in real time the impact of those, which means that we can start what I described earlier, get your house in order, get a cryptographic center of excellence, whether that's a virtual or a physical lab to start and play with, because now you can ingest all of those things now and start playing with what Paul was saying about your use cases. You'll be looking at PKI, you'll be looking at VPN, you'll be looking at code signing, you'll be looking at the infrastructure based on the PKI, the public key infrastructures. Those are things that you can do right now. And that's when I say preparation is not just talking about it. Preparation can actually be physically getting your organization, seeking that advice from external sources, bringing resources in, talking to the community at large, which is who we belong to. So I think NIST has done a terrific job. Crossing fingers and toes, we're going to see something, like I said, this summer, but don't hold me to account. That's not under my control. But we are at the mercy of that, I guess, to some extent for a lot of what we're releasing as products and what we're also consuming as a customer.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Now, on the video, we saw that IBM and Vodafone have been collaborating. Maybe expand a bit on why we're collaborating on this topic and dive into a bit more on the collaboration, Ray. Paul, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think we've quite publicly disclosed that we've been working with IBM for a long time, particularly within telecoms. But then also we've been working with IBM looking at applications, the more positive side, yeah, of the potential use of quantum. We have some. I was going to say intractable problems, but they're not quite intractable, but they can take a lot of computation time, yeah, that we potentially want to use quantum computing for, yeah. What that gave us, and probably the key event really was quite an insight really into the research roadmap, yeah, and the milestones, yeah, and that gave us the drive really to realize that this was going to be here a lot quicker than we thought it was going to be, in terms of having some cryptographically relevant computing capabilities, and so that coupled with the need as we saw it, because it still is a longer timeline, it's not just a year, but it is some years, and maybe Ray, you might want to expand on that. Sure. But I won't put you on the spot too much, but that we're going to need to plan, and you shared the same vision for us, which is to bring the ecosystem together, because we knew that we couldn't just do it on our own. A, because of the refresh cycles and the fact we need to work with suppliers. B, because of the interoperability issues. Yeah. So.
Right. So just to add on to what Paul eloquently articulated, when we started looking at this, granted, 5 seconds of free commercial, as you may all know, 3 of the 4 algorithms that have been selected came from IBM. So we had the cryptographic expertise to begin with, but that doesn't do anything unless you're able to implement it in a productive manner in the context of a client. So that's what we were looking to do. And the first question is, which industry should we begin doing this? And every enterprise on earth uses telco. There's nothing without it, and it's fundamental as well. And you have the most complex infrastructure across the entire stack that you need to solve. So telco was obviously the best place to start. And we also wanted to take this consortium-based approach. And what we mean by that is we can work with individual clients at a time and move them forward. Maybe we'll even make more money doing that way. But that's not the point. We need to move the entire industry across, because there's a lot of awareness that we need to build. And problems can be shared, or the solutions can be shared if we recognize that the problems are common. That's why we start these consortiums in telco industry, payment industry, looking to do it in critical infrastructures and technical areas. So that was a strategy that we embarked on. And obviously then we looked at, it's not just IBM doing by itself. We need to do it with partners who will complement our capabilities. We have technology expertise, you have phenomenal industry expertise, and so with known leaders such as yourself or Vodafone in the telco space, it was an obvious choice of complementary capabilities that we bring to it, along with GSMA as a body. So that's the genesis of how we approach the problem, and the proof is in the pudding, as they say. So there is a lot of other folks who have joined the consortium now, and so it's really a groundswell, if you will, and we have had tremendous learnings that we're able to then apply at Vodafone and benefit each other.
Yeah, there's about 20 operators now.
Yeah, 20 operators, right.
And the post-quantum telecommunications network, so.
Well, will you maybe build on what Ray was describing there, because the connectivity of telcos, they're connected to everything and everyone, and maybe expand a bit more on why it's so important to telco and what we've learned as we've started the journey.
Yeah, so we always regard, well, and many governments regard telecoms as critical national infrastructure, and the confidentiality of the customer traffic is absolutely paramount, right? So I think that's always the central starting point. Yeah, I mentioned right at the start that it's a unique threat attack surface. Yeah. We face all the different range of threats, yeah, from nation state all the way through to the lone hacker, yeah, if you want to think of it as a spectrum, yeah. So we've got a lot of capabilities that we've potentially got to protect against, yeah. So that's why that in essence gives the motivation, yeah. And some of the importance, just as we move through all of the Gs, yeah, and we're finally getting to 5G, yeah, in numerous countries, essentially, we've enhanced the security here, and we built in more and more protection around, authorization, around the communications flows, yeah. Luckily, we still use a lot of IETF standards, yeah, but there's a lot more use of PKI that sits within that, yeah. And so essentially, yeah, within that, yeah, we have a responsibility to move those to quantum safe capabilities. But it's not, why is it critical, or why is it important? Maybe timely might be the important point here. Really is mentioned at the start. We've got we've got radio access network, backhaul, the core, the interconnects. Yeah, all requires interoperability, not just so we can pass off calls and we can move data to other operators, but it also means that we've got a diversity of suppliers that we need to bring with us. Yeah. And if the release standard around 3GPP is 12 to 18 months, yeah, suppliers will be building that. There'll be another couple of months, maybe years, yeah, before they build that into the feature set. And then if you think about us operating at the scale that we do in 20 countries, yeah, the way in which we might roll out that equipment is going to be quite staggered across quite a number of years. Yeah. So if we leave it too late, yeah, then we're in a problem, and then we're in a rush, yeah, and then we're ripping out and replacing things, yeah. And whenever we rip out and replace things, yeah, we know we're going to have a problem, especially with crypto, I reckon.
I couldn't agree more.
Now, one of you mentioned compliance before. How do you think the regulation will change in this space, Ray?
It's a very interesting and important question, Emma. The regulation, I think you called out when you introduced the topic to the audience about the changes that have come through in the UK, as well as in the people who are in the US know about National Security Memorandum 8 and 10 and the CNSA guidelines and all that. They actually set a whole set of actions in motion that have propelled us forward. And now we are looking at this both from an industry standpoint and from a region or a country standpoint. So, I think there is a meeting next week for ETSI, which is European Telco Standards Committee. And so they're all meeting together to see how they can accelerate this work through some kind of regulatory guideline. And to elaborate a bit on what Emma introduced as the EU Commission published recommendation on a coordinated roadmap for PQC transition. And this came out 3 weeks ago, April 14th or 15th, if I remember right. And that is the one that calls out very specifically actions that member countries should take by a certain time. So this is very similar to what CNSA guidelines have published, which for those who may not be aware, CNSA guidelines call for compliance by 2033, and first compliance begins in 2030. So it's not too far out. So if you have to do any work with federal government, you really have to comply to these. So there are enterprises that are beginning to address that. So this is all on the country and the industry side, but we continue to educate at every time we get with the Federal Banking Authority, with the Federal Reserve, with the SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India, and there are a lot of industry discussions that are having, particularly in the UK with DSTI and DSIT, I think, and then you have, UK National Cybersecurity. I can go on and on about all the conversations that are occurring, but at the end of the day, the regulators need to be informed and educated first, and then we will work with them collectively to help craft the appropriate set of regulations and guidelines. That's how I see this evolving, Emma. And will there be a completely new set of regulations? Probably not, but they're all going to be enhancements or modifications to what already exists, because that is probably an easier and better route to go.
Do you want to build on that?
I have a comment to add to Ray's points about readiness and these dates and impending activities. And one of the things that's come up many, many times is the right to left approach to how to achieve something, say, by 2030. So to Ray's point, for example, think about any asset that's being manufactured today.
Yeah.
Any of this, and I'll even speak from the context of, for say, one example within Thales, we build satellites in one of our divisions. Imagine pushing that into space and someone saying, I should have made that crypto agile and post-quantum safe because I've got to switch out some firmware so that doesn't, evaporate in space. You don't have the luxury of pulling it out of space. So that's a really extreme example of a stranded asset. But the point I'm making is that code signing is something as simple as everybody understands. Code signing is already in the implementation phase now with many manufacturers, such that they're differentiating themselves from the rest of the world by saying, we're quantum safe because we're using a hybrid signature, or we're going to have it by 2027. You're going to see this change now already, because the right to left is, you even have to change your entire infrastructure from a software development lifecycle, supply chain, all of those things. So when you start to look at the big picture of how you're going to get there by 2030, to Ray's point, imagine a large organization who's got a 10 or 20-year plan that now has only 2 years to get there. This is a real change. Yeah. And I'll even put back on the table, let's just say that something does happen, to Paul's point, that a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, which by the way is not announced on LinkedIn, it's either already exists or it will exist without our knowledge. That's the sort of Q-Day moment that a lot of us are going to find organically. It's not going to be announced. We're not going to get a memo. We're not going to be told. These are the things that we're preparing for as the unknowns.
Yeah. So let's think a bit more about what we can do about it, because we keep talking about the problems. So the main challenges and opportunities, maybe with a telco and a broader enterprise lens on it, Paul, what challenges and opportunities will companies face, and maybe expand a bit on what was in the video for us.
Yeah, I think the main challenge, the main challenge is often, so we all work in cybersecurity. It's a pretty full workbook, yeah. So. Yeah. Even within our own organisation, there's debates about whether we should be working on this program or that program, where we should be prioritising the resources. So I think, unfortunately, I have to say that that is the challenge for many organisations, and there's some of the other things really is around implementation. Implementation gaps, if you like, because we've got to work out, how we're going to implement it, And I think that goes to the point about doing some preparation and getting some understanding where you need to do this work, but I do think it presents, some opportunities, because I've been in cybersecurity for many years, and we do love, talking about assets, and understanding all of our assets wherever they are, we talk about hardware, we talk about software, and now's the time, I think, to build on it and get a good handle on cryptographic inventory, and I say that from a telco-specific industry viewpoint. It's not the only we're not the only industry to experience it, but simple things like expired certificates have had some pretty,
It's one thing for a server in the rack. It's another, like you said, for something from SpaceX.
Exactly. So it all adds up to distraction away from the good work that we should be doing. So.
From an enterprise standpoint, if I may, I mean, broadening the aperture, right? It is definitely a challenge, and at the same time, I'm optimistic guy. Look at the glass as half full. So there are opportunities as well.
Right.
So the challenges, right? Fundamental things. Do we understand the new cryptography algorithm? It's not, people equate it to Y2K and they simply hate it because it is not as simple as replacing a 2-digit with a 4-digit, right? This is complex. Let's not trivialize the problem.
Yeah, right.
It is complex. At the same time, I'm not scaring people either, but at the same time, understanding the algorithms are important in the context of where you're going to use it. That's a challenge. We don't know how. And then you talked about the inventory, Paul. No enterprise can clearly say, I know exactly where cryptography is used across my entire enterprise. Right?
They can say it.
They can say it, but can they, you know?
Would they?
Would they? Yeah. So the inventory itself is a simple thing, but it is a problem, right?
Yeah.
And then you mentioned, Blair, that this is a huge transformation. It takes years.
Yes.
Has anyone completed a large transformation that takes multiple years without any challenges? Right? So the answer is no. Right? I'm not trying to paint a gloom and doom story here, but anything that takes several years, we need to prepare. Then obviously there is cost, there's budget, there is skill. So all these are challenges, right? Now the glass half full side of me says, well, there is an opportunity here too. And I'm going to talk about 5 C's here. One is clearly there is an opportunity to create a cryptographic posture for your enterprise. That doesn't exist today. Here's a great opportunity. You are going to have to do the work anyway. So create that cryptographic posture, not just quantum safe, cryptographic posture. The second is, do we know what the crown jewels are of your enterprise? You have to identify them because you identify them and then you prioritize based on that. So the second C is, you know, your crown jewel. The third C I already talked about, crypto agility, right? So here is a way to implement crypto agility. Then the third is, this helps you obviously with compliance, right? And the last one is, how can you turn this into a competitive advantage?
That's exactly right.
That's a great opportunity. Many of our clients are beginning to look at that and say, how do I turn this into competitive advantage? How do I monetize this? So there is a clear business opportunity as well here. So as much as it is a challenge, Emma, I think there is a great opportunity here. And that's what we urge clients to approach this like. Not just a problem that needs to be solved, but an opportunity to propel them forward.
And this is an opportunity to do it without the time pressure or a regulatory pressure to get started, I think. I'm going to open for questions in a moment, so please feel free if you've got questions to approach the mic. But before we do that, maybe just to sort of wrap up and give some key points, each of you, maybe 30 seconds, sort of key point for you. Ray, do you want to go first?
Sure, why not? I talked about 5 C's. Now I'm going to give you 5 P's.
Come on.
Right? And Blair, you talked about, what was it? Procrastination is not a plan. So that's 2 P's, right? But they're separate. But the first thing is, don't panic. I know I just said, oh, here's all the challenges and all that. So no need to panic, but prepare. And that's the inventory, and get yourself, you know, ready with the technology and the algorithms and all that. Then prioritize. Figure out where you need to start first, and there's a method to the madness. So that prioritization helps, and prepare a plan that works for you. There is no cookie cutter here. You just have to have a plan that works for you and works for your environment. And finally, progress iteratively, right? So that's the 5 P's I would say. Don't panic, prepare, prioritize, plan, and progress iteratively.
Blair?
Ray did a terrific job there. How do I follow that? I don't have 5 P's or 5 C's, but I would say that one thing that people need to start is leave this room use the word illuminate. Illuminate those around you. Take this opportunity to go back to your organizations, or if you are that organization, and start this, not tomorrow, but the week after is fine. Like, let this settle in a little bit. But I think that what Ray is pointing out is that we are moving past this concept of theory to practice, and you can actually have an effect on your organization more than you know it. So seek out that advice, engage with this ecosystem that we all belong to. I thought we were doing pretty good co-authoring one algorithm, and IBM's got 3 on me. So, but again, seek out those subject matter experts that you probably already know, and if you don't, ask questions and we'll find you some.
Paul?
I think I think Ray and Blair did a great job there in terms of, I think when you do the discovery, be prepared to be surprised when we've done that at scale. I will say to my boss, we were on a great process, but even I was a little bit surprised by some of the results. I think the only things to build really on top of that, is the use cases is key. If you're not part of if you're part of the telecom sector, please get involved with the PQTN. We think that's a great way to do it. It's GSMA, and we can share some of those best practices. If you're not, I think either work with your peers or have a think about what you might do as a sector. Because I think that's really important. I know there are more industry sector initiatives now, but it's a great way to start to share some of the burden.
Super, thank you all. I think I'll start with this mic over here.
Given that we've had a number of large state-based actors harvesting data for a long period of time for the purposes of exploiting that data and replay attacks once they have cryptographically significant quantum systems available, has NIST moved too slow in this space? And given the acceleration that we're seeing in this space, is the existing method that we use to accredit these things, particularly for government use, need to be re-examined?
Question.
I'll take a shot at it. To be honest with you, I don't believe the NIST has been slow, because we are actively working with the NIST and the NCCOE to help accelerate the definition of standardization. And it's a complex set of things that you want to do. So what you put out is going to be adopted by everyone and has to be done within a time frame. So there is pressure, obviously, in making sure that what we put out, what NIST puts out, is in fact hits the mark. And to be more precise, I believe, Blair, there are 3 algorithms they're going to publish the standards for in mid-July, is what I heard yesterday from one of the NIST resources, and they said you can quote me on this. So that's coming out, as far as the harvest now and decrypt later, I think you need to panic in certain areas when it comes to harvest now and decrypt later, but it is not a broad panic. The reason I say that is any data that has time value over 7 or 10 years is what you need to be concerned about from the harvest now decrypt later. So everybody says, oh, credit card information. Well, you get a new credit card every 3 years or 4 years, or they can even change it at moment's notice.
That's correct.
Not a big deal. Healthcare record, and so there are some that are concerned, and then in industrial secrets, if you will, and IP that needs to be protected, pharmaceutical information, those are all highly sensitive with respect to longevity of time. Those are the things we need to protect. So this kind of goes into prioritization. So as soon as the standards are published, people can begin to act on it. And one other point, you didn't ask this question, but I want to take this opportunity to make it clear is, yes, we are waiting for the standards. But the fact that the standards come out doesn't mean everybody can go off and do things right away. That is a false thing, our understanding. There needs to be a set of things. Libraries need to be made available using these. Then they need to be tested, FIPS standard, There's a whole set of things that need to happen. So there is about a year's worth of work, if not more, that needs to happen before broad-based adoption. And I want people to understand that. So in that regard, there is anxiety in saying, hey, let's get the standards out. I fully get it.
I'll add a little. That's a great question, by the way.
Very good question.
If you don't mind, to Ray's point, you'll hear the term crypto agility, and what I think is often it's a misnomer that this is a new term. It's been around for a long time, but PQC sort of took that term over and said, it's all about crypto agility, just swap out the algorithms and everybody's fine and you can go back to bed. What's happening now in the harvest now decrypt later is that there's this element of all the data at rest is AES encrypted. That's pretty good. That's a good thing. Why? Because we do that. And IBM and ourselves, we work together on that. And Vodafone's a customer and it does that. The problem with that argument, though, is if you harvest, let's say you compromise a TLS session, and guess what you get during that compromise? You get the key. Mm-hmm. So now you're harvesting and decrypting at the same time. This is a scarier thought than waiting down, because here's what I'm going to tell you. AES is strong enough, arguably theoretically, and Ray can correct me here, they have this thing called a quantum computer. It might theoretically take 13 million stable qubits. That's a long way away, arguably. But if I was able to compromise RSA and ECC with, say, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 qubits, you see why there's no panic, but there's urgency. So I think that's what we want to make sure is that we don't separate these two as separate, like harvest now and we'll just start storing data and we can decrypt down the road. No, it's a lot sooner than that. Did I make a mess of that, Ray? Because you can correct me on anything I just said.
No.
Okay.
I can see we've got, I think, 2 more questions at least over here, so let's go into the question here. That's Mike.
Yeah, I had 2 questions, so I'm glad you just answered one of them, which is, how many stable qubits does it take to break RSA 2048? And it sounds like it's somewhere around 5,000 to 7,000 or so.
Theoretically.
My other question was, as we start to look to remediate this, there's sort of the inventory aspect of it, which is sort of maybe the width of it, but to understand the depth of it or get a sense of, what it's going to take, it'd be great if, we could identify, hey, let's take one project and go end to end on it and just see what we run into, because all those hidden things that you were talking about. Do you have any thoughts of what a good project might be?
I think that's a great question. My last P was progressive iteratively. What I meant by that, the last, did my mic go off? Test.
Where is the mic?
It's okay.
It is, right? Okay. So the fifth P that I called out was progress iteratively. What I mean by that is, don't take all of them and do it at once, or even large chunks and do it at once.
Right.
The best way is to sort of discover what you need to understand what discovery is about on a small scope, 100 applications, 10 applications, 5 applications. We have done work with clients who did as small as 1 application because they want to say, hey, show me what discovery looks like when you do this in this area. Then let's move on to the network and look at discovery on a smaller scale. Also, help me remediate this 1 application, please. We did that work for a federal agency, and it's all about learning, right? It's about how do you come up to speed and understand what the scope of the problem is. And this is a great way to do it. So making 1 iteration through that cycle is a great way to start. And then you say, I've learned enough. Now let me expand my scope a little bit, make 1 more pass through it, right? Then 1 more pass through it. That's the way to do it. And one thing I do want to call out is that folks don't quite understand the impact of this is if, again, a company like IBM has about 3,750 internal applications that the CIO's office has. And that's as close to the real number as it is. And we have about, slightly larger number of software products that we have built over the years. All of these need to be remediated. We're not going to start it in one swoop, right? So you learn, iteratively and go. And you also find that we interact with probably an equal number, if not more, of partners in the ecosystem. The SAPs of the world, the Oracles of the world, a small service provider who is giving me a service in a SaaS model. Everybody needs to remediate themselves. Not to mention the network we are running on, right? So I'm not trying to scare you into saying this is a huge complex problem, but be aware that you also need to keep track of where are my ecosystem partners in this cycle of getting remediated. You need to keep track of those. And who do you need to work on first? I mean, I use SAP and Oracle as examples. I'm not picking on anyone, but to give you an example of, Sugar CRM versus SAP Oracle, there may be, a difference, and you say, I want to have the Sugar CRM converted first, fine, right? Or you may use a niche fraud and abuse management, fraud and, abuse detection software from a niche vendor, and you need them to change first. So this is your prioritization. That's what I meant when I said you need to create your own plan that works for you based on your prioritization that is risk domain. Sorry for the long answer, but took the opportunity to make it.
I also think it's why some sector collaboration's important, because we've all got core processes and use cases within our sectors that are repeated, and actually we may as well collaborate in doing some of that discovery and mapping, because what we find in the radio area network for radio access network for Vodafone will be very similar as it would be for Telefonica.
Totally.
So I think there's some industry collaboration. I see you've got a question.
Yeah, so how do you work with your vendors in a way that you don't end up paying for most of those, most of these costs?
It's a great question. I had vendor as a follow-on as well. So maybe one of you give your perspectives on what do you think the responsibility on vendors will be, and how do we work with vendors to make the changes that are needed?
So, I mean, I'll go first from the network perspective. Yeah, so, I mean, we've got very long established relationships with vendors, but if you're in telecommunications as well, you'll also realise we're trying to encourage greater diversity here in that supply chain, both for innovation and competition reasons as well. Yeah, I suppose maybe I'd say use the word lucky. Yeah, but because we have standards, that are required for interoperability, and that also sets the framework by which we'll measure some of those suppliers, about the features that they're going to implement, and that gets ratified at an international level, and so flows through the system. So to a certain extent, we can use that mechanism because they have a seat at the table as well, about defining those standards and what gets flowed through, what's reasonable, what's not. I think we've been lucky as well. I think like many other operators, it's really important that we have a very close relationship with those suppliers, and so we do. They've got their own perspective on this, and we've both harnessed that through GSMA and PQTM, but also individually as well, try to get their perspectives and their take on it and what they think they are. It's interesting as well, being global as predominantly Europe and Africa. They have very different perspectives on what algorithms need to be implemented and how they're going to be implemented. So that also brings a little bit of a different viewpoint to us. So I mean that's how we're approaching it. I don't know whether Ray or Blair.
Well, I'm very biased. I work in the alliances and the interoperability side of business all day long, every day. We're actually customers of each other and suppliers of each other. People come to us and ask us, what does Thales use? And just to put it in perspective, we're not the size of IBM or I don't believe Vodafone, but we're 80,000 and counting. And what we're doing right now is implementing a policy in such that as our supply chain comes in, there's going to be a fundamental, where is your PQC readiness? Why would we do that? Because we can. And so teach your procurement to ask those questions. I think that's a really viable way to not to suggest that, for example, those that don't, you're not pushing organizations into something that they shouldn't. You're helping organizations adjust to the climate that's there. The environment is changing quickly. We don't have 20 years to prepare for this. So that's why I think it's important that as we work with IBM, we have over 100 and something integrations. We co-develop cryptography together. That's just one small piece. But we are all over the world collectively as organizations. So that's the one wonderful thing about the ecosystem, is that we have to work together.
Let me make one very quick point on this. Demand a software bill of material and a cryptography bill of material from your vendors.
Spot on.
That's the way you will know that they are in fact PQC compliant, and that's the version of the software you're getting.
Now we're about to run out of time, so quick question with a quick answer.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just want to validate a view. My name is Adesh Gowde, and I've been in consulting now for almost 2.5 decades. This problem that you're talking about is a more of an ecosystem problem, and there are variants by industries. So if you look at payment as an industry, there's an enforcement from PCI. You have to go from TLS X to TLS Y. It's enforcement. However, if you look at MNO or telecom space, GSMA would issue a guideline, and they issued a guideline, I think, in February on telco use cases. So it's an industry problem. So my view that I want to validate is, unless and until there's an enforcement coming from an industry body, but if it's a regulator, it's still country specific. Maybe a country is more mature than B country, and that will take its own time. So unless and until there is an industry enforcement, and this is a collective problem. It's the vendors, the consultants, the service providers, and the client. The client is the end recipient, and they are largely driven by the vendors, who are then guided by the consultants, and then the consultants take those references from some industry body. So if it's PCI and payments, it can enforce relatively quickly as against other industries. That's the only view I just want to validate.
Thank you. Thanks for the comment. I've had the 1 minute sign, so I'm just going to quickly pop the last slide up. I don't know if the laptop has dropped. I just wanted to give you a couple of takeaways. RSA Conference always likes to give everybody an action plan, so if you've attended a few of these, you'll have a few action plans. We wanted to make it practical. Hopefully we've given you some sound bites today that allow you in the next few weeks to take away and start having some communication within your own organisation. I think the point about starting with one end-to-end process is a really good way of bringing to life how complex this could be by mapping out one end-to-end use case, and that helps raise awareness of what the journey ahead is in your organisation. We also think do some form of skills assessment in your own company. Do you have the right skills to embark on this journey and this change that lies ahead? Do you have an inventory? We certainly didn't, so start on that journey to understand and do the crypto discovery across your organisation. And then come up with a way of defining your crown jewels, your business impact, so which of those assets matters most, to the point about the data longevity, which of those assets handle data that's going to have value in a long period of time. And then within 6 months to a year, think about completing those business impact assessments, quick wins, and then think about the supply chain. Thank you all for joining us today. Really great, and thanks for the questions.